Hey folks, Schneider here. We're still in the middle of our conversation, so I wanted to. I've been learning so much from the comments. There have been thousands of comments on everything that I put up here, our whole conversation. And I'm learning so much from the comments. So we talked about free men of color in the Confederate uniforms who volunteered. Now I know a lot of people looked and said, no, that can't be true. I was one of those people said it can't be true, but I've had literally thousands of folks, and now I've read several books about it, and I've seen some in person, some black Confederate graves. So it appears that was true. So that, of course, begs the question, why? Why? Now, I've had a bunch of people say that they were forced, but that's not, we're talking about free men of color. We're not talking about slaves who were basically loaned to the military, because that did happen. Slaves were loaned to the military, and then the owners of them got their pay. Talk about a terrible thing. That's a terrible thing. But that's not what we were talking about. We're talking about folks who actually enlisted of their own free will. So we have to wonder why. So I've been looking at a lot of things, and when I looked at a lot of things, another question came up, and it's a tough one. It's a tough one, and I'm looking, and I've found much evidence on both sides of this question, but I have found an awful lot of evidence, and you can take it for what you will, but go look online and see what you can find to answer this question for yourself. By the way, remember, that's what I'm advocating. I'm advocating you grabbing a hold of not only this current rhetoric, but things you've been taught, things I've been taught my whole life, or actually more important, things I have not been taught. You know, there's a perhaps the worst sin of all, as if they're numbered, they're not, but perhaps the worst sin of all in a relationship, a friendship, a marriage, is the sin of omission. The sin of omission is when I know things and I don't tell you them. Because I heard a very wise man in California who recently passed away said, there are always three sides to the truth. There's your side, there's my side, and there's the truth. But the truth is something you have to find. And then you have to decide for yourself whether it is indeed true. Now remember, I advocate reading old material, old books, not something that was written yesterday, not some opinion that was formed by someone in the last couple of hours or years or even decades. I look at things from as close to when they were happening as possible. So here's the question. Were there, prior to and including and after the Civil War, or as many call it, the War of Secession, because it wasn't called the Civil War when it was happening, it was called something else. Later it became called the Civil War. This is something I've learned from you, so I appreciate that. I do. We've had over 30,000 comments, and I love it. I love it. So, were there during that time in the United States, let's say from the forming of the United States until 1900, were there black, this is a tough one, slave owners? Were there in the United States, the states united, black slave owners? And I have found so much information on this. And like I said, to both sides of it. I'm going to have to read a lot more. Not only books, but read what you bring to me. The stuff that you folks are bringing to me is just incredible. And I hope that you are all endeavoring to read not only the comments, but a lot of times people will put a link to where they got their information in their comment. So after you've mulled this over for a little while, I'll put a couple links in here too. So that's the uncomfortable question. I want to talk to you about one other thing before I press stop. There's a thing called the assumption of goodwill. I'm going to say that again. The assumption of goodwill. John, what does that mean? I have no idea what that means. Well, let me tell you what that means to me. What that means to me is especially among my loved ones, let's talk about that. If you're married, and your wife or your husband says something that hurts you, and you think, my God, why did she say that? Why did he say that? What I try to do is I know that person loves me, so I assume that whatever it was said in the spirit of goodwill. If I was offended by it, took it the wrong way. So my assumption is going to be that if you say something that hurts my feelings, because you are my friend, I'm going to think, well, he couldn't have meant it that way because he's my friend. She couldn't have really meant it that way because I know she loves me. So that brings on a conversation that starts like this. Hey, I'm sure you didn't mean it, but what you just said really, really hurt my feelings. It hurt me to the quick. In fact, it seemed mean and mean-spirited and uncaring. So I assume that was not what you intended to do, so let's talk about it. For some reason, right now, we seem to be living in a time that, not just with people we don't know, and I'm advocating, by the way, not only taking this assumption of goodwill into your household, I'm advocating you take it out on the street to the new people you meet, so that you assume rather than assuming, which it's a scary thought, but it seems like we have moved into a place where there was a commercial when I was a kid, and the guy, Robert Conrad, had a battery on his shoulder, and he said, "Go ahead, knock it off, I dare you." Almost like he was looking for a fight all the time. Well, lately it seems like many of us, and me included, I do it too, but it seems like we've gotten into a position where we are just aching to get into an argument or a fight or an altercation of some kind. And I'm here to tell you that's not a good way to live. Not just because there'll be violence, because I believe there'll always be violence, but you may miss the opportunity to make your new best friend. You may miss the opportunity to have, remember I said this, to have your recipe card files moved around and your perspective changed. So take that with you. Do with it what you will. Thanks for being part of the conversation. I cannot wait to see what your research shows. I'll put some of mine up. And you all have a great day. By the way, I do hope one of these days, one of these Tuesday nights, I can't wait for the haves and have-nots to come back on. Love the haves and have-nots. I've been going on the Addicts of the Haves and Have-Nots page and Addicted to the Haves and Have-Nots pages. And I tell you what, people are ready for Tuesday to light up again with this great show. All right, you all take care. I'm John Schneider. Thanks for being part of the conversation. Bye.